Okay. Hi, welcome to the Council of American Jewish Museum's Talking Circle. My name is Anne Ramotka Greenwald. I'm the Interim Executive Director of CAJM, and we are joined today for our virtual Talking Circle in a true Purim, post-Purim, delightful moment to meet with an incredible artist and teacher, Isaac Brynjegard-Bialik. Isaac is based here on the West Coast. I say here because myself and my other colleague, Margalit, are also based on the West Coast. And Isaac has been exhibiting, making art for decades. His work is rooted in Jewish understandings and Jewish sensibility. Along with his wife, who is an incredible rabbi, they have this incredible program, Paper Midrash, where they explore deconstructing Jewish text and then creating visual midrashim with themselves, but also with audiences around the world at this point, actually. And so Isaac is going to give us a little sneak peek into not only his artistic practice and his artistic world, but into these types of workshops and artist in residency programs that he and his wife have become so known for. And we are even being joined by somebody from an upcoming city. So, if you have yet to meet Isaac and Rabbi Shawna in person, then, you might be able to meet them soon, either by considering bringing them to your own organization or by actually looking up their schedule and seeing them at a venue in a town near you. And so I don't want to give away too much of Isaac's secrets because that is why we are here, is to reveal the hidden secrets of Purim and his artistic practice. And then I'll pop in with questions at different times. Um, I will say that Isaac and I have known each other for a very long time. And so, without further ado, I'm really excited to introduce a true artist friend, a wonderful collaborator, and just an incredible individual who I know has often been my teacher. And so I'm excited to continue to learn with you today.
Thank you so much, Anne. Thank you, Margalit, as well. And I tell a story about you all the time. I tell the story about you coming to my studio years ago, back when it was just half of the garage, when I was still really trying to find myself. And I'd put out all my work, and I was working in these different media, and you looking around and saying, yeah, everybody paints, but this thing you're doing with the comics is really interesting. Um, and I took that as license to play. And, that idea of finding that thing that just works for you, that connects, that when you do it, you say, oh, that's the reason that I'm here. That's my mission or my superpower. That is my passion, and just following it. And so I'm indebted to you for giving me a push in the right direction. Of course, you and your husband are just wonderful. So glad to be brought in with all of you lovely Cajun people, and to be spending some post Purim time with y'all. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little bit of visual stuff up here. I do have some work set up in my studio, and I'm hoping that some of you, at least some of you, have some materials at hand and may want to create with me. You certainly don't need to, depending on how it goes and how the conversation is. We may have more or less time. Please do use the chat. I'm going to keep my eye on it. But Anne or Margalit, if there's a question that comes in or you want to break in, please do. I would love for this to be, as interactive as possible, given the nature of the beast here. And what, of course, we're going to be talking about with Purim's celebration still ringing in our ears. It made sense to talk a little bit about masks and secret identities, because, right, that's what Purim is all about. Now, you mentioned as well what I do with my wife. So what you're seeing here, this presentation, the content in here, is at least half of the work of my wife, Rabbi Shawna Brynjegard-Bialik. Certainly all the smart stuff is. And she can't be with us today, but I'm going to do my best, and I'll be skipping some things and just trying to give you a little bit of taste of what we do as Paper Midrash. We consider it to be text study through art, using paper cutting, pop culture, other media as well, as a way to dive into understand, study, question traditional Jewish text and story. And so it really is a combination of her work as a rabbi, as a teacher, as someone who is knee deep, if not neck deep, in Midrash all the time, and my work as an artist. Now, my work is about exploring the role of narrative in the development and expression of identity, particularly Jewish identity and Jewish narrative. I work in paper. I like its fragility. I like how it's one of the key ways that we share information across generations. I think about us unrolling the Megillah, Esther, the scroll, not to mention Torah in general, right? This is how we transmit information, is ink on substrate. And so I love using that as a way to play around with comics, which is the other half of what I do. Comics, also a very Jewish thing, and I'll tell you why in a moment, and playing with the parallels between comic book mythologies and our traditions to look at those stories that really make us Jewish and make us human. Now, if you're not familiar with my work, this is what I do. It's all made with cut up comic books. This is part of a series called Paper Tefillah, which explores the American Jewish service. I should say American progressive Jewish service, using comics as a foil for understanding that sense of prayer or praying. I bring that up only so that you have a sense of why it is that I'm really into these comics. And I'll show you a little bit more here, a little bit more relevant today. These are portraits of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, the co-creators of Superman. I know we're all at least vaguely familiar with Superman. Jewish writer, Jewish artist, working away in the early 20th century here in America. And I used comics either from their hands or the 90 years of creators who have worked since then as a way to explore their character and what they were trying to do with this hero. And it's what we're going to be doing today as we look at text, using comic books as a way to better understand things. At least, Purim things. Now, why comics? People ask this all the time, and it's probably no surprise to most of you all that the comic book industry was started by Jewish creators, by Jewish artists, writers, editors, publishers. From the very beginning, the nature of comic books has been a very Jewish style of storytelling. The way that it uses language, the way that it uses morality to convey lessons, but also just to get us engaged with what's going on. And the reason that Jews were involved in comic books is because if you were a Jewish creative in the early 20th century, you could not get into the mainstream, advertising industry, for instance, publishing. But comic books were just this random thing that a couple of guys in New York made up, lowbrow, much like movies, and so filled with Jews creating this industry from virtually scratch. And we tell people when we work with them that if you have your Torah goggles on, you can see Torah anywhere, particularly in comic books. Now, for those of you who are ready to jump into masks and identities, secret identities, because it is Purim we're talking about, I'll just use two as an example. So you may know the names Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. They were born Stanley Lieber and Jacob Kurtzberg. They are the two folks who almost, well, not single-handedly, but four-handedly, created all of Marvel Comics in that universe. The X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, all of those characters, all of those stories created virtually by just these two Jewish guys from New York. And their names are a key part of this. A lot of Jewish creators used to hide their Jewish identity, either because they felt they would be more employable or seem a little bit more mainstream as they were publishing comic books for a broad American audience, not just for Jews. And so they disguised themselves, right? In the same way that superheroes do. They had this sort of alter ego, right? And clothing and secret identities feature prominently in the Purim story, so much so that every year when we read the story and retell it, we often dress up as those characters. They are, of course, integral to superhero stories as well. So we know that Batman, right, is the alter ego of Bruce Wayne, millionaire playboy. We know that Superman is Clark Kent, a reporter for a great metropolitan newspaper. To be fair, we were talking about Purim costumes a little earlier, so I do have to show my 1977 self-made Superman Purim costume. God, that's a good haircut for me. I should go back to that look. I think I can pull that off maybe. Um, but costumes are really key to this superhero thing. And I'm going to share with you a little bit of how we teach these ideas when we're working with a group, either at a synagogue or a JCC or at a museum. But I'm going to go a little light here on content so we can have some time for conversation, which I think is key as well. But I want to show you first what superheroes and their comics do with these costumes. So you may notice up top, those are all heroes from the comic book world. At the bottom, we've got our villains. What you will see is the heroes are all in those primary colors: blue, yellow, red. That is a predominant choice made by artists for these comic book characters. Villains tend to be in those secondary characters: greens, purples, oranges. And a lot of that is because we want to immediately communicate to the reader what's going on, right? In the same way that when we read the Megillah, we are given up front a list of characters. This is who it's going to be. These are your heroes. Comics do it visually, right? We have this real sense that the costumes they wear, though they disguise their identities, they are a reveal of who they are at heart. Now, the thing is, Hebrew and Judaism has a little bit of a distrust of that sort of dressing up. This is where my wife's scholarship comes in, where I'm always astounded at what she brings me as inspiration for my art and for our teaching. So the root in Hebrew, most words have a root, a three-letter root, and you can tell what it means by those three letters. The root for clothing, beged, is bet gimel daled. It is also the root of the word for cheating. The verb bagad means to cheat, right? This sense that clothing can be deceptive. And it's no surprise, I think, that a religion would give you the sense that there's a difference between surface and the real person you are. And certainly comic books give us that sense of, yeah, I mean, they are tricking us, right? The clothing that they wear, whether it's the Superman costume or the costume he wears as a reporter, one of those is maybe less real than the other. The idea is maybe you're protecting yourself, maybe you are trying to convince someone about who you really are, or maybe you want to keep them from learning who you are. And it's the same thing that traditional Jewish texts do. Everyone in the Purim story is pretending to be someone else. It's not just Esther, right, who hides her Jewish identity. The king pretends to have power, even though he just does what his advisors say. Haman is pretending he has power, but he's very insecure, easily threatened. We're not going to get political today. Mordecai's clothes change based on what he is showing others. And we take very seriously this idea that their clothing and who they present is relevant. And so, I mean, this is about reading and understanding the Megillah, right? We are commanded to do so. I'm so excited to be able to do this with you all and talk about, like, why. Why are costumes? Why is deception at the heart of this story? And there are a few reasons that we see consistently superheroes will hide their identity. One is to have a private life. This is Spider-Man Peter Parker and his wife, Mary Jane Watson, after he's revealed his identity, being mobbed by cameramen. You sometimes have that identity because you want to keep the real you private. You want to have some space for yourself. And we see that in the Purim story, personified by Vashti, right? Vashti wants privacy. The costume that she is asked to wear by her husband, the king, is, well, just a crown and no other clothes. She says no, she refuses. She's trying to keep her privacy a certain element. This is a Gustav Doré etching of her, and I just love this piece. So having a private life. Another reason that a superhero or character in a comic book might have this sort of a disguise is to pretend to be something you're not. Here's Jimmy Olsen, who is an investigative reporter trying on a mustache so he can go undercover and rout some bad guys. Of course, we see that in Purim as well. King Ahasuerus wants to appear stronger than he is. We think about that letter that he writes in which he says that all the women of his kingdom have to listen to their husbands. He dresses himself in finery and the sort of metaphorical finery of being king, in order to present this idea of himself as more powerful, more intelligent, more wise than he really is. Now, comic book characters may have at heart an evil reason for wearing a disguise. So Loki, we know, is a typical villain of the Marvel Universe. He is always disguising himself because he's trying to gain more power, or he has some scheme he wants to accomplish. We, of course, see that in Purim with Haman, who acts like a trusted advisor. He dresses himself up as someone who can be trusted, who Ahasuerus should listen to, but he is really only out for himself. A little Rembrandt Haman for you here. Now, Batman uses his disguise to get attention, right? Almost the opposite of what we talked about earlier. He wears a costume, he says, to strike fear into the hearts of criminals. I don't like bats. I mean, they're great. They eat insects. That's wonderful. But they are a little scary if they're close. So I get it, right? He's trying to be seen as this symbol. Also in Purim, Mordecai wears this sackcloth outfit. He's wearing it to express his concerns, to get Esther's attention about how serious this threat to the Jewish people is. Later, we're going to see the king dressing him up in royal finery, putting him on the horse, which in fact is probably what pushes Haman over the edge. But again, that idea that this clothing draws the eye to whatever it is you want to communicate. Finally, the last thing that superheroes will do in terms of having the secret identity, we often hear that it's to protect their loved ones, right? That you don't want someone who's not involved in this fight for justice to be drawn in, to be attacked by villains. So for instance, Batwoman, who is a queer Jewish superhero and awesome, she's also a Kohen, she disguises herself so that she doesn't put her family in danger. This will sound extremely familiar because we get to the hero of our story, Esther, who disguises herself as a Gentile so that she can get into the palace, so that she can be, in the right place at the right time to protect the Jewish people without endangering them needlessly before she's ready to act. And we read in the book of Esther, right, that perhaps this is why you have been brought into the palace, right? For just this opportunity to be a hero, something that she is reluctant to do. And Mordecai talks with her about her identity and, don't tell them who you are yet. Here we have Chris Pine giving Wonder Woman's alter ego Diana Prince some glasses as a disguise, so people will know she's Wonder Woman, right? She has this person who helps her out, who helps her to disguise her identity until the time comes when she can reveal it. Now, this is getting less and less popular as a trope in stories these days. We're seeing a lot of reveals where heroes have a core group of people who know them, who know their identity. So Esther has Mordecai, of course, but even in the recent Superman movie, we see Superman. No, I hope this isn't a spoiler. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Superman has already revealed himself to Lois. She knows his true self. And there are rumors that, it looks like Jimmy and Perry, some of their office friends, know that she's dating Superman, maybe already have suspicions. I'm hoping in the next movie we have a little bit more of a reveal, because the truth is, Superman's disguise is pretty thin. There's this great panel here where Superman is realizing that his glasses are not the best disguise. Because if you show up somewhere and you've got glasses all of a sudden, right? No one says, "Who are you?" They say, "Oh, you got glasses." Superman is realizing that part of this disguise, it may be simple and it works, except when it doesn't. And so, right, people are suspicious when they feel something's off. Even the king is a little bit suspicious of what Esther's doing. He's trying all these things to get her to reveal her secret. We read about this in the Megillah, but she has a sense of timing, right? She knows that there's a moment to reveal yourself. And we see that in superhero movies even, right? Here's young Peter Parker, Spider-Man, meeting Doctor Strange. He introduces himself and he's like, "Oh, Doctor Strange, we're using made-up names? Well, then I'm Spider-Man," right? There's this sense of even your name can be misleading, and when do you use your real name? Wonder Woman knows that there's a time and a place to do that, to save innocent lives, right? That's when you reveal yourself. Esther has that same lesson. And so comic books give us the opportunity to think about, how do you know when the time is to reveal your true self? How does Esther know? Sometimes it's a very public reveal, like Tony Stark here at a press conference revealing that he's Iron Man, or maybe it's a banquet with your husband, the king, and his most trusted advisor. Sometimes it's a more private reveal. So here we have Superman revealing to Lois this truth, or it could be the way that God reveals God's self in the book of Esther. This is only one of two books in the Tanakh where God's name does not appear in the text. The rabbis tell us that God's presence is private and hidden, and I love this slide. This is the wonderful thing, right, about finding a partner who completes you and challenges you. My wife brought this into the presentation here. We read in the book of Esther that she did not reveal her people or her kindred. In that purple bold at the top, that's Esther. That's her name in Hebrew. In the book of Deuteronomy, God says, I will keep my face hidden on that day, austere. Virtually the same letters. And this is how our rabbis tell us that God is within the book of Esther in the Megillah. It's subtle, it's private. You have to just look for it. God is there even in hidden places. I just think that's wonderful. We joke a little bit about, what that true name is. This is a great moment from comics where Wonder Woman, Batman, and Superman have really just met. Wonder Woman is saying, I'm Diana of Themyscira. She's revealing herself. Superman says, I'm Clark Kent or Kal-El. Batman, of course, his real name, he says is Batman. He sees Bruce Wayne as a cover, which reveals a lot about who he is. And sometimes, right, that mask that we have is more the real us than who we claim to be. Now, Superman did recently, they've retroconned it, but at a certain point, he had revealed his identity to the world. Under the hands, actually, of a Jewish comic book writer, Brian Michael Bendis. He felt that Superman was, if he stands for truth and justice, but if he stands for truth, how can he be lying all the time about how he is? And the truth is, it hit me really hard. Bendis knows what he's doing with comics. Something that we had been seeing for 80 years, which was Superman did not tell people who he was. And Brian said, that's not right. He needs to reveal who he is. And it's this incredible story arc that I highly recommend. It's just this reminder to us, right, about our identities, about who we are, and about how we find opportunities to share that with people. So I run through this a little bit because I really want us to spend some time, if we can, either creating with me, or I can do a little bit of work in the studio here. I've set this up. I want to share one last thing with you that we always do when we teach. We don't have to necessarily do it together, but it's this wonderful blessing from a book on the doorposts of our house from the CCAR Press. This lovely blessing that our tradition gives us about appreciating or creating art. And I think it's just this fabulous way to give art this Jewish context. Now, many of us, I'm sure, grew up being told or warned about the second commandment, right? Oh, Jews don't make art. Oh, graven images, this and that. While meanwhile, we're seeing all this Jewish art around us, not just in the ritual objects, the menorah in the synagogue, the Ner Tamid, the Sukkah, the Hanukkah we light, my very colorful grogger that I made. When is this? In 1994. Still, this is the year we got married. We see all this art around us, not to mention pictorial art. Think about the Haggadot that we have that are filled with illustrations. The famous bird's head Haggadah, which you are likely familiar with, right? By putting birds' heads on people, well, you're no longer representing something that is on earth or in heaven, and therefore it skirts that line. Judaism has a history of our people making art, appreciating it, either as a part of ritual or just for the pure enjoyment of it. And so I mean, think about our text. What is the first story in our Torah? It's about creation. It's about God making things. And we talk about how we are God's partner in ongoing creation after that. Likewise, what's at the very center of the Torah? The building of the Mishkan, in which Betzalel, who is said to be skilled in all these arts, asks all of the Israelites to bring whatever talents they have, whether it be weaving or stonework or working with jewels. All of those skills, all of those talents must come together to build the desert tabernacle. This is a part of who we are. And we love to give people the opportunity to see that looking at art, talking about art, and making art has that Jewish context. It's an integral part of being Jewish. And so we start with this blessing. It's a lot of fun to really give people that sense of, oh, this isn't just a thing. Like this is how we as Jewish people live. So I do have, and you have, I believe, some materials that you've got in front of you, a few little templates, some pre-selected comic pieces. But before we jump into doing some creating, and as I said, I've got my table set up so I can do some work. I don't know, Anne or Margalit, if there are any things that we want to be talking about here, any questions, any things you want me to elaborate on before we do a little hands-on work.
Well, I want to know how you know Batwoman was a Kohen.
Oh, so Batwoman. So I'll give you a little background.
That did jump out at me too.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So here's the thing. So back in the 50s, when comic books were under fire from a lot of authorities about being, reprehensible, promoting vigilantism and horrible things and crime and so on, one of the other charges that was leveled at comics by Frederick Wortham in Seduction of the Innocent, he suggested that characters like Batman and Robin were advocating homosexuality, which in the 50s was a bad thing, right? Obviously, we have a very different understanding. We did then, we do now. But in order to avoid those accusations, in order to maintain their publishing business, DC Comics had this great idea to bring in a love interest for Batman in the person of Batwoman. So she was introduced in the 50s. The idea being that they would be able to say, see, they're heterosexual characters, which is what you want, right? But they never had a romantic relationship in the comics. And in fact, she sort of drifted off to the sides. We didn't hear a lot from her. Cut to the 21st century, in 2006, she was rebooted by Greg Rucka, a Jewish writer over at DC, rebooted as this queer Jewish superhero. So first of all, you say, oh, well, no wonder she and Batman didn't hit it off, like, playing for the other team. But also, the reason that we know that she's a Cohen is because this is part of her story as a superhero. So not just that she's Jewish. Her name is Kate Kane, by the way. Kane, we know, is a common bastardization of Cohen. It is mentioned in the storyline, as well as her Judaism not just being something that she casually mentions one day like, oh, I'm Jewish. Not just in that December issue where when everyone's celebrating Christmas, she has a menorah, although we certainly get that. But her story is filled with her Judaism. We see her apartment randomly, and she's got Shabbat candlesticks that are out. She has a Kabbalah poster, this beautiful poster. She wears a Jewish star. There's a storyline in which her father is talking with the rabbi when he's dealing with some tragedy. And I got one last thing here. So Batwoman, her mother. Her father is a Jewish guy, right? We know that he's General Kane, but it just so happens that his sister Martha Kane married Thomas Wayne, took his name, Martha Wayne. So Thomas and Martha Wayne are Batman's parents. So again, Kate's father Jewish, his sister Jewish. Her son Batman. DC Comics in 2006 accidentally made Batman halachically Jewish. Now, of course, I think to be Jewish, you really got to choose to be Jewish. I mean, there's a lot to it. Batman does not consider himself Jewish, but I believe the right of return would apply should he ever decide
He's culturally Jewish.
to take that up. Yeah, I mean,
That's
and
funny.
of course, there's a whole conversation about these characters created by Jewish artists and writers, many of whom are not Jewish, like Batwoman. Superman created by two Jews. Again, the Marvel Universe, Batman is created by Jewish artists. Will Eisner was asked about this. Will Eisner was a famous Jewish artist, writer, editor, publisher. Back in the day, you may know his work on The Spirit, which is one of the first comic books that really broke the genre. He also invented the term graphic novel.
Mm-hmm.
He was asked once about his character of the Spirit, whose name is Demi Colt, which has a bit of a little Irish fling to it, and is not a Jewishy character in any way. Someone asked Eisner about the character, and he's like, "Well, I guess." He said, I think he is Jewish in the sense that he is my creation. He's a part of me, right? There's that little bit of autobiography that goes into so much of art. And I think we see that as well in characters like Superman, who is explicitly not a Jewish character, but whose story is filled with Judaism. So regardless of the costume that he wears, so he's created to be this superhero that appeals to all Americans, if not the world. And the way that he is given that is by being genericized, right, into this sort of Midwest Protestant type of hero. But he's coded as Jewish. His identity at his heart, his story of being sent in a rocket, not a basket, from his home, being taken in by people who are not his people, but he's raised as them. He has to balance his traditional dress and language with the new world that he finds himself in. He feels that he's an outsider, but he wants to be a part of this community, but he has his own background. It's very much the Jewish immigrant story, and I know that Jerry and Joe, talked about their Judaism, talked about not that it informed Superman directly, but it informed all of their creations. And I think we see that in superheroes so broadly, even the ones that are not explicitly Jewish. Purim gives us that opportunity to talk about how do we present ourselves, what do we hide, what do we reveal.
Mm-hmm. Oh, stunning. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Isaac, as you move towards your studio desk, what I would also love for you to kind of delve into, and you may already be poised to do this, is talking a little bit about like how you construct work and your personal practice. And one of the things that always strikes me so much about your work and how you blend what many of us will think is traditional paper cutting with the secondary layer of the comics is that you often talk about the fact that you paint with comics. And so talking about how you are layering, what you're layering, why you're layering, when you're layering, getting into some of that.
Yeah, I'm glad to do it. And this is a setup that we had. Yeah, I know it's being recorded. This is a setup that we came up with back in 2020. We've been doing these in-person workshops all the time. And then during the pandemic and the stay-at-home orders, we found ourselves being asked, what can we do in Zoom? And so we sort of developed this whole two-camera system, studio right here, right, so that I can sort of work and still be able to talk about what I'm doing. You can see what I'm doing. And yeah, let me put aside some of this Purim stuff just for a moment to show you a little bit of what that is, right? So, so you can see here, right, this is a piece that I actually did sort of as a test for a recent show. In fact, I've got a bunch of new work that I'm going to be showing at the Peninsula Jewish Community Center coming up next month. I believe we're mounting the show. And this was a piece that I was doing as I was playing with some more Jerusalem imagery, thinking about Yom HaTzmaut down the road, thinking about my connection to Israel, right? So we have the Old City, we have the 7 hills of Jerusalem, and what you can see underneath it is, right, it's all layered comics. And it's one thing to talk about the color, to talk about these words, right? I'm going to say later to audio, where you can read the words "Hello, beautiful" here. A little bit of fun there. But for me, the comics are a very specific way to do collage, to talk about Jewish tradition. So these comics are all X-Men comics. Yeah. One of the things that I do is I write down the comics that I cut up on the back of a piece as I build it. It's great for reference for me. It became this thing that I do, and I can remember what's being used there. Now, why X-Men comics for this portrait of Jerusalem? So the X-Men were created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, again, Jewish writer and Jewish artist, in the 1960s here in America. And they are the way that they talk about the heroes in the comic are they are mutants who are feared and hated by the non-mutant community, but they nonetheless choose to have this mission of like protecting not just themselves but everyone. Right? It's very much the mission of the Jewish people to be a light unto the nations. The X-Men are everyone agrees, including Stan and Jack, they're a bit of an analog for being Jewish in America, for being perhaps misunderstood, being seen as an outsider. And so I like that idea that they are a stand-in for that Jewish presence, especially when we talk about, our homeland. And in fact, you can see here, there's a reference here where it says, tell him when he's ready, his family on Krakoa waiting for him. Krakoa is this sort of mutant homeland that was going on for a little while in the comics, a place where mutants could be who they are amongst other mutants, basically people with abilities, is what the word mutant means. It's nothing more than that. But this place where that was a homeland, and not for necessarily everyone to be there all at the same time, not that everyone had to move to Krakoa, but that it was a place that was always there if you needed refuge. And as I was working on this piece, and certainly in this last week, as we have seen this growing Mideast conflict, I don't know if we're using the W word yet, if we're allowed to use the W word. I guess there's some debate on Capitol Hill about that. But thinking about our people, the safety of our people all over the world, but particularly our family and friends that are, yes, in the land, in our ancestral, indigenous land. And so for me, the comics are a very important part of this. Not just, there's nothing wrong with the color and the texture and seeing it as a craft or artistic collage project, but for me, the comics, yeah, they're essential. The comics that I choose, how they go in there, the symbols, whether it's the dove here, whether it's, the speech bubbles, the specific characters, or, even a hint here of the word X-Men up at the top. Again, it may be the sort of thing that is hidden to a non-comics person. For comics people, it's obvious. For me, it's important. And the truth is, I make this work. I'm making it for me first. It's something that I do as a way to sort of interrogate the past and to think about the future. And so these comics, which are, if you can see here, so behind me, I've got my long boxes. This is my childhood comic book collection that I'm cutting up for my work. And I continue to buy new comics. Obviously, we buy new comics because we're doing workshops all the time. But the comics as narrative, as morality plays, as other texts created by Jewish people, even when they are, as they are now, not always written by Jewish artists and writers, they nonetheless create this wonderful synergy, I think, with our Jewish texts. So, with that in mind, what I've provided you all, and you're welcome to cut along with me if you wish. You've all got a PDF provided that's got some templates in it. This is exactly the sort of thing that we do when we are in person or even online. We have two ways of approaching a workshop. One is when we take quite a bit of time, we have people design their own pieces from scratch. When we do a shorter workshop, whether it's our golems or a revelation piece, or in this case for Purim, masks, we'll start with a template and give people the opportunity to jump closer into the collage. In fact, we sometimes provide some other options as well. I like to give people the chance to edit them or make any changes as they go. And what you're seeing here, what we do in our workshops is my process in the studio, except that, I always start with a blank piece of paper. Every piece that I do is new. So if you're cutting along with me at home, this is certainly something that you can do with your scissors carefully. I'm going to use my knife because that's my method. And the first part is getting that top layer. So as I showed you, right, it's two pieces. There's this cut paper, and then there's the collage underneath it. The first thing is always that cut paper. For me, it's often about, what am I trying to express? What story am I playing with? So what we're going to do is we're going to remove all of these black spaces. The black spaces are going to be the openings, the more teases through which the comics show. So if you're doing this along with me, and again, I don't expect that we'll all necessarily be able to finish up this entire project here. I wanted to give you a little taste of it. Certainly, it's the sort of thing that if you like it, you continue afterwards, or maybe you do other things. But it's that two-layer approach, right? There's multiple things going on. On the top is this very Jewish storyline, the Jewish narrative, and underneath it we get these comics, which add color, which give a little bit of, yeah, as I said, they work as a foil, right, for thinking differently about the text. And what we like to tell people is, especially those who come to our workshops who are not artists, this is something that you don't have to be good at drawing. If your middle school teacher told you couldn't draw and that you should get a job as an accountant, then this totally works for you as well. We've already got some shapes here. The comics already have all of this color and texture. All of the heavy lifting has been done. Collage is an opportunity to be an artist without necessarily having deep expertise, deep technical training. Obviously, we like to talk about knife safety when we're working with people, especially if they've never held a knife before. We often make the joke, you're probably noticing I'm using my left hand. My wife, Shawna, is also a lefty, which means when we're instructing rooms full of mostly right-handed people, we get to make various jokes about it's okay to use your right hand, no one's going to judge you. We talk a little bit about the experience of learning how to use a pair of scissors in kindergarten or learning how to write. Usually having a right-handed teacher who does not know how to teach left-handed children. So I'm going to keep cutting here.
Isaac,
And
I've got a quick question for you, if that's all right.
yes, please.
What is really cool is I actually see you touching on two different Jewish art forms, comic books and, the Ashkenazi tradition of paper cutting,
Mm-hmm,
with
mm-hmm.
these really fine lines. And so I'm interested as to, we've talked about the comic book side of things, but has, the Ashkenazi paper cutting formally influenced you? Did you find it after? Like, what's your connection with that art form?
Thank you. It's a great question because I didn't cover it yet. So paper cutting is one of those things that I think most people, myself included, when you first hear about it or see examples of it, I mean, I dismissed it. It seemed so, simplistic. We see those paper dolls, or snowflakes that we do as projects, or those, it's lions and it's lamps and it's vines, and it's obviously technically interesting, but I don't know that I really appreciated it until we went looking for a ketubah. And the artist that we were directed to, who was actually the daughter-in-law of a professor of ours at UCLA, was a paper cut artist, Deborah Band, incredible artist. Has a number of great books of her paper cuts, including The Honeybee in the Garden. She's done work with Song of Songs and Psalms, beautiful work. And we saw what she was doing with Ketubot and fell in love with her work. Got our ketubah. 9 months later, we moved to Israel for my wife's year in rabbinic school, and I needed something to do. I was a graphic designer by trade at that point, and I started watching artists in their studios in Jerusalem cutting up paper. Archie Granot, his layering, if you know Archie's work, incredible stuff. And I thought, well, I know how to use a knife. Maybe I should try this. So I bought a knife. Valentina, thank you for joining us. Um, I bought a knife and I started cutting paper in Israel. That's where I really started this. And part of it is because I saw modern Jewish artists doing it. But as I learned, this harkens back to a long tradition of Jews making paper cuts, particularly for Shavuot. Shavuot used to be celebrated with these shavuselech or roiselech, which were little floral decorations made as paper cuts. We can trace this back to Galicia in the 16th century. Certainly, we have a tradition of Italian ketubot made as paper cuts. Those are very well known. I like to say, and it's a little tongue-in-cheek, the reason that Jews like paper cutting is because it's inexpensive and portable. So if the Cossacks show up at your door, you can't bring a big slab of marble or your oil paints or whatever. Paper's light, and all you need to cut paper is something sharp and something flat, and you can pick that up again wherever you are. It's a little
Right. I
tongue in
actually
cheek.
think that that's important, right? It's not just tongue in cheek. It's actually not only is it about survival, but it was also about inequity, right? About artists being not included in the academies. It's about traditions that they could afford and have access to at any point,
Yeah.
things that were around their homes. Yeah.
And
Which
that's
I
the
think
beauty.
actually blends with the comic piece as well.
The beauty of collage is that, right, you make it with what's around you. Do I have newspapers? Do I have other printed materials? Do I just have colored papers? And you use what you have in front of you. Similar to, we do this golem workshop and we talk about making golems as a way to protect Jewish people, right? The golem isn't about oh, I've got this engineering background and robotics or whatever. It's what if I got mud? I got mud from the river. Great, making a golem, right? That's what the Maharal does in Prague. I mean, in the legend, obviously. You use what you have. Collage is totally like that. And yeah, the comics for me, I may have a general idea of what comics I want to use for a piece, but the truth is, I have to go back to my studio, to the long boxes, and well, what do I have? What's around? And because it's my personal collection, it's not like I have 10 copies of each comic to play with. I have the one. And so you make choices. What do I have? It may not be the thing that I thought I had, and the process of collaging changes the piece. Um, and so, just for those of you who are following along, right, I cut this out. You can still see a little bit of the template there, right? A little bit of that black. So I'm going to use the other side as my front. And what we're going to be doing is we're just going to be filling all of those openings. Ooh, it's like a cooking show where they've got the finished lasagna ready to go. We're going to be filling those openings with these comics. The back, you can see, all I've done is tape them here. Sometimes I will work on a separate sheet where I'm gluing them down with like a nice acid-free adhesive. This means that I can actually layer as I go. And often these pieces get 3 or 4 comics thick. I like to say they're a bit like a tell, right? An archaeological dig where you can see the older choices. Sometimes I'll intentionally put things down and cover them so that only I know that they're there, a little bit for myself. But today I thought it'd be easy to just play with a little bit of tape. I've got a roll right here, and just attaching those comics to show through. Now, what I provided to you in that PDF are samples of comic panels I thought would be useful in this exploration of identity. When I work here in my studio, it's my childhood collection. When we do workshops, we will bring comic books. Sometimes I'll look for stuff that's going to be maybe thematically connected. So if we're doing something about Revelation and Sinai, I'm going to make sure that there's lightning and Thor comics, for instance. But I often as well will say, okay, I have just this one comic. That's all you have. What are you going to do? That same sense of you have to make do with what you find, right? And really the truth is, looking at these comics and trying to find, well, what do I think would make sense here? And we've been talking so much about Jewish identity, and what these masks are. I'm going to use the Thing. Thing's a great example of a character who was created by Jack and Stan, wasn't canonically Jewish in 1962 when he first appeared, but Marvel eventually gave into the fan lore that he was a Jewish character. Jack always drew pictures of him celebrating Jewish holidays. There's a great exhibit at the Skirball right now on Jack Kirby, and you can see an old Hanukkah card that he made with a drawing of the Thing, wearing a kippah, reading from a Siddur. Fans always thought of him as an avatar of Jack. And so in 2002, Marvel Comics had a storyline in which he comes out as Jewish. And the editor then said, we didn't make him Jewish. The Thing's always been Jewish. We just didn't talk about it. Which I love, right? That sort of sense of maybe keeping part of your identity private until time. So I'm going to put some Thing in here. You know what? And I wonder, I'm going to start easy. Just a little bit of texture, right? A little bit of that rocky skin showing through. And what I'll usually do in this sort of situation, once I find a spot that I like, I'll make some marks here with a pencil in the shapes that I don't want. And that gives me a little bit of a guide on where to cut, right? And then I'm just cutting a little smaller than those. But I know that I've left myself enough room that the piece of comics is going to be large enough to fill that hole. Comes right out. That's the part where people faint when they see that I'm cutting up comic books. But suffice it to say, this is a fairly new comic. No one was going to make college tuition with this. Tell Gracie she's okay.
I will.
And then, taping it to the back. So holding it in place, a little bit of tape. And this is, of course, a very thin piece of paper. We usually use watercolor paper in our workshops. That's this nice sturdy stuff. It doesn't show through. You'll get a little bit of show through here. But that's the whole process. The comics fill in the mask. And so you have these two layers of This very literal sense of I'm building a mask, and then what are you filling it with? Are you revealing who you are? Are you the 1962 thing who maybe plays it close to the vest? Maybe you don't talk about Judaism when you're out in the real world. Maybe you don't wear that shirt with the Hebrew on it. Or maybe this is a post 2002 thing. Maybe you are someone who is loud and proud about it, who does not let people forget that you're Jewish, who really wants that to be the frontmost part of your personality. That's what I believe is so wonderful about this process is that it's so very, as all art is, so very personal. And you make these choices about, what do I want to put in here? People may not see it, right? But they have the opportunity to get a little bit, a glimpse of what your story is. And I will tell you, I make plenty of pieces where, I've decided it's one thing, and my wife tells me there's another thing going on there, where I understand my piece better after showing it to someone. That's my process. I'm glad to continue cutting. I'm glad to just, hang out here. I know we're coming up on the end of our hour, and I've had a lovely Purim time with y'all.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Isaac. This has been great. This has been great. I'm gonna stop the recording.